Imagine waking up to the realization that you are already dead. On October 25, 1944, that was the reality for thousands of American sailors in the Philippine Sea. They were part of Taffy 3, a tiny task unit of escort carriers and small destroyers. Their only job was to protect paratroopers on the beaches of Leyte. They had no heavy armor. They had no big guns. They were tin cans. And they were completely alone. Taffy 3 was never meant to fight. But on that morning, the sea fog broke, revealing the single largest mismatch in naval history. And for the men of the USS Johnston, the only way out was to fight. Out of the morning haze, towers of steel began to rise. The Japanese center force had arrived. It was a fleet built for absolute annihilation. There were battleships. There were heavy cruisers. And leading them all was the Yamato, the single largest battleship ever built. The Yamato was a monster. Its 18-inch naval guns fired shells that weighed as much as a small car. The moment Taffy 3 was spotted, the ocean erupted. Japanese gunners opened fire, and massive geysers of water, dye-colored to mark their splashes, began to rain down on the unarmored American ships. For Taffy 3, there was no escape. But one man refused to surrender. That man was Commander Ernest Evans. A half-Cherokee, battle-hardened Native American officer, Evans knew the odds. As the Japanese armada bore down on his tiny destroyer, the USS Johnston, he picked up the radio and gave an order that was clinically insane. Evans turned his unarmored ship around and charged. He ordered his crew to lay down a thick, oily black chemical smokescreen to hide the rest of the fleet and unleashed the Johnston's tiny 5-inch guns. At point-blank range, Evans drove his tiny, tin can directly at the wall of Japanese steel, weaving through shell splashes that were large enough to sink his entire ship. It was suicide. But it was the only hope they had. When Evans closed the distance, the Johnston unleashed her torpedoes. One hit a Japanese heavy cruiser, crippling it. The Johnston was being hit repeatedly, but she kept firing. Evans's raw courage inspired the other tiny destroyers. The Hull, the Heermann, and the Samuel B. Roberts, a ship with guns so small it was nicknamed a toy, all joined the suicide charge. For over an hour, they fought a desperate, point-blank melee. They were firing at massive Japanese cruisers and battleships from just hundreds of yards away. On the Johnston, the bridge was destroyed. Evans was badly wounded, but he kept fighting, using his bare teeth to tighten the bandage on his hand while commanding his crew from the burning stern. The Japanese commander, Kurita, panicked. He couldn't believe tiny destroyers were attacking this aggressively. He assumed he was fighting a massive American fleet, and in his confusion, he gave the order to retreat. Kurita's retreat saved thousands of American paratroopers. But the tin cans paid the price. The Hull, the Samuel B. Roberts, and the St. Lo were gone. And finally, the USS Johnston, battered, burning, and completely defenseless, slowly began to sink into the Pacific. The survivors floated in the oil and debris, watching their ship go down. As a massive Japanese destroyer passed them by, the Japanese sailors stood rigid at attention on the deck. And their commander did the unthinkable. He gave a stiff, crisp military salute to the defeated, unarmored American sailors. He saluted their unbreakable willpower. This was the Battle of Samar. The day that tin can sailors proved that grit and willpower could shatter a wall of steel. Subscribe to the Historian Soul.